So welcome everyone tonight to this presentation through the Department of Health, Mental Health Professional Network. Just really grateful for them to be supportive of this work and for Amanda for helping behind the scenes get this network up and running, particularly for mental health professionals as we try and navigate interesting times in the mental health system, bringing novel treatments into a mainstream setting. So tonight we will be exploring the Ayahuasca Dieta or Dietera experience and utilising metacognitive skills and ritual to support these landscapes. So before we begin, I invite you to drop into this space of acknowledgement of our country. You may like to close your eyes for a moment in time. Just feeling into this incredible country that we're on and the custodians of this land. And you may like to tune into a specific space in Australia that really nourishes you and brings you strength. Might be a water body, a mountain, river, creek, countryside, these incredible landscapes that we have to draw strength from. And just feeling into the song lines around Australia, all the nations that were here long before we were. May we learn to walk together. Being deeply grateful for the plants, the molecules been used and worked with for thousands of years. The sacred ceremony, our teepee, the jungle, making our way to the labs and the clinics and the research centres around the Western world. And as the incredible news for Australia, the rescheduling of MDMA and psilocybin, may we really learn to balance the science and the sacred and ensure that multidisciplinary professionals are brought into that space and it's not just dominated by the biomedical model, and that we actually see real systemic change and really, walk with deep reverence with these medicines. And just acknowledging that, ayahuasca in Australia is illegal. And tonight I'll be sharing a lot about my lived experience, as well as weaving in the professional, psychological, transpersonal landscapes, but really from a place of acknowledgement from the Signs of Life, which is the organisation that I run, that we advocate for the decriminalisation of these medicines. And although I'm an advocate in the clinical space, ultimately I believe that no one should be punished for their choice of freedom of consciousness, particularly in sacred and sacramental ways. In Australia at the moment, it's illegal for my spirituality to exist, and illegal in many other countries around the world. So we really need to acknowledge that laws are socially and politically constructed, dependent on the government and the culture. And, Signs of Life isn't encouraging people to go out and take these medicines. It's a fine line being a pioneer in this space. We look at the science, we explore the nuance, the risks, but it is your personal decision, and you need to take that seriously and get consultation with your medical team, your elders, your mentors, and just really being wise about these choices and getting educated. Also acknowledging the need for irony and reciprocity with these medicines that have been woven into shamanic culture for thousands of years, and we're really, at a critical juncture in history, and what we do really matters, and there'll be ripple-on effects around the globe. And just a shout out to all those countries around the world where decriminalisation is happening and their societies are not falling apart, and how when people are given choice and education and lack of stigma and judgment, incredible things can happen. So what will we explore tonight? I will attempt my very best to explore the realms of shamanism and neo-shamanism and the complexities there, the ayahuasca Dieta landscapes, the cultural context in which that occurs. Very, very brief insight into research and the benefits of ayahuasca and psychotherapy, metacognition and preparation and integration. I will speak a little bit about specific vegetalista plants that I've dieted with, but I just want to acknowledge that I'm not a curandero. I cannot advise people on what plants to do. That is up to the ayahuasca. And talking about plants is complex because it is very personal, and what my experiences have been may be completely different for someone else. So just a word of caution there that there's no recommendations for you as an individual to do these plants, and that you need to be working with someone who ideally is connected to a deep shamanic lineage that has sat with these plants and has that connection and blessing through the songlines and culture. But hopefully we've got time to explore an ikaro. I've got one to play where I'll ask you to listen for 5 minutes and just reflect on your experience and what that was like for you. Typo there, purging, the many different ways you purge through dieta and ayahuasca. And how do we alter our states but turn them into altered traits or embodied ways of being? Because there is no point going into these states if we bring nothing back and if we become more fragmented and split in our personality. We will explore the self-care, the risks and pitfalls of the dieta landscape in particular, and how ritual, exploring the archetype of self and the symbolic realm can really support you on your journey. So when I was looking through my profile pictures of what to put here, I came across this one and I thought to myself, there's no way I can put this up. It's too much. And then I reflected on where I was 6 years ago before I went to the jungle. And if you had told me that I would be singing, drumming, feeling safe in my body, knowing what self-esteem is and what it is to be both strong and very vulnerable in this world, I would have said you were dreaming. So this image is, I can put there proudly because of the journey that I've been on and what the medicines have done for me, particularly the curandera plant, Bobinsana, which I dieted on, which really, really activated just self-love and my prayer that everyone in this lifetime can really can know that. So a little bit about me. I'm a psychologist and a social worker, a therapist, been a therapist for 15 years, mainly in sexual abuse therapy and suicide prevention and everything that flows from those crimes and painful experiences, and really specialising in the realms of psychedelics and spiritual emergence. I'm the director and founder of the Science of Life Psychology, which has been around for about 12 years now. We do a lot of student placements, clinical work, research, clinical trial development, community work, and work in the disability space as well. I'm fluent in Auslan and have a real passion for working with the deaf community. So just a little bit more about the Signs of Life, really inspired by wisdom traditions, modern clinical theory, and my passion to integrate science and the sacred and ensure that we have that balance when these medicines roll out across Australia to the best of my ability through training, through education, through relationships, that we get that balance right. We offer ketamine-assisted psychotherapy through our contacts at the Signs of Life, CBD and THC referrals, and obviously ayahuasca prep and integration, a lot of integration groups and programs and conference outreach as well. And just a shout out to all the pioneers. There's many, many more on this list that I wasn't able to include, but just the people that really in the early days, took a risk professionally, reputationally to to bring these medicines into the landscape. And we have incredible EGA that was here before all of us, over 20 years doing the grassroots work. Australian Psychedelic Society. We've got Hypnosis is really specialised in VR, psychedelics, Prism and research. Nanda Clinics really showing what it's like to work with cannabis from a master plant perspective as opposed to a drug. And Psyche pioneering the ayahuasca DMT space from a research sense, and Silo with their incredible knowledge of pharmaceuticals and trying to walk that line of research and ethics and integrity in those spaces. So we will explore neo-shamanism, the function and purpose of the plant medicine. Just checking, yeah, we'll go to this one first. So I guess in traditional ayahuasca work, shamanism is a really unique body of work. It is typically brought about by lineage, crisis and initiation. It is really embedded within the culture. There's often a risk of death and a real calling towards shamanism. There's a strong cultural container to hold that, and there's less need to integrate or have psychological services per se, because the community and the ecosystem is embedded within that, and it is woven into the fabric of their community. The shaman is also a healer for the body, not just for transpersonal fields, for ailments, for physical conditions. So it's not just seen as a spiritual medicine, but a very practical medicine for treating different conditions. The difference with neo-shamanism, and it's a contentious word, is that anyone can call themselves a shaman these days. They can do a course, they can jump online, they feel the urge, they have an amazing experience, and then they start serving medicine. And it's not to knock anyone who's got the call to explore medicine, but I think in the ayahuasca and specifically the Diatera lineage, it is really culturally bound, and it is serious, and people can get really, really sick if they're not in alignment, and the altars that come from that will be sick, because you really do need the cultural blessing, the blessing from the plants, the song lines through the Icaros, and to be grounded in those spaces. There is a shared field across both, is that nature is the healer, intentional work of the shaman or neo-shaman. There is animism shared across both contexts, and the value of mystical spaces and states. But neo-shaman tends to weave in more of modernity and Western spiritual practices into the serving of the medicine. And most neo-shamanic circles have really been born out of the malaise of modernity. So people feeling really disenfranchised by capitalism, emotional illness, disconnect, isolation, and really working in those realms. Whereas, as I've said, in the culture, in the jungle, it's really just woven into the fabric of the community. We will explore ayahuasca. It's the brew. And ayahuasca is the MOIA inhibitor. That is like the plant that activates the DMT and the sucrina. And it's the combination of those plants that come together to form the psychedelic brew. There is a whole range of plants that can be woven into this brew, such as mapacho, a master plant, and the lineage, the Vegetalista lineage that I work with have up to 11 or 12 plants in the brew. And each plant has its own personality and quality and property. And over time, as you learn to navigate those spaces, you learn to feel, see, and experience the different personalities within the brew. For many, that might sound like a big jump from a cosmological perspective, but this is what is typically experienced and reported in the Dieta worlds. Even if you are atheist or agnostic, most people report feeling different qualities and properties of the plants in the Dieta, and whether that's from the perspective of a plant spirit or just the intention that you have with that plant when you drink it. And I'll explain that a little bit further. Yeah, ayahuasca is from the Quechuan language, is named for a thick brew, a bitter tea. I is the soul or a dead spirit, and huasca, the rope or the vine. And it's used across Peru, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and now all around the world. And also legally in churches, Santa Dami churches in America. The origins, I won't report too much on this because it's very complex, but it's been used for thousands of years. First, chemical properties of ayahuasca were discovered in 1957. It became illegal in the 70s, and it was synthesized in 1971 in a lab. And there's been many pioneers in the field, some which I'll quote later, such as Terence McKenna and Rick Strassman, people like that who are really pivotal in trying to document and record the complexities of the DMT landscapes and the power of ayahuasca. There are different types of ayahuasca. So there's the yellow ayahuasca, which is the most common. There's over 27 varieties. The taste isn't as strong, so it's typically used more for first-time drinkers, and yes, more popular, more very colourful, very visual, and not as overwhelming. I find that hard to believe because I find even after all these years of working with ayahuasca, for me, it's still quite overwhelming, but it's one of the least overwhelming plants of it. We have the red ayahuasca. It's much stronger than the yellow. And it's like a deep, deep cleanse in the body. It goes right into the cellular cleansing of what they say, of the soul and the body, and quite a heavy feeling in the brew. The white ayahuasca is connected to potentially channeling sexual energies and spiritual energy, and it's quite rare out of all the vines, and more commonly used by the Shipibo lineage. And the Shipibo also have a Dietero lineage, but this is different from the Vegetalosa lineage that I'll speak of. And then there's the black ayahuasca. It's the strongest type of ayahuasca, and it's capable of providing deep, intense visions. And also in shamanistic cosmology, just the energy protection. So once you do the deep, deep clean and have the intense visions, there's a protection that enters the body. What does ayahuasca feel like? Obviously, it's very, very different for everyone, but typically there's the hallucinations, cognitive and emotional, perceptual, increased heart rate, blood pressure, nausea, and vomiting. It's typically quite a safe medicine unless you're taking SSRIs. You can go into serotonin shock. So it's really important that no one's taking any antidepressants, or typically no medication is preferred. So you've got a clear portal for this medicine to work through you. But it is typically very safe if the set and setting is safe and the curandera knows what they're doing. She is known as the mother, reported in the literature, anecdotally, subjectively, all around the world. Mother not from a desire to do any fortune telling or psychic reading in that sense, but just the Jungian tarot set of books. And I loved this quote. The author wrote, and it wasn't related to ayahuasca, but it really stood out for me. The task consists of integrating the unconscious with the conscious. At this stage, the mother symbol no longer connects back to the beginning, but points towards the unconscious as the creative matrix for the future. Entry into the mother means establishing a relationship between the ego and the unconscious, which is really, for many, experienced as birth and as the matrix and as the future as well. All those paradoxes weaving together. She can be very gentle and extremely tough. And Terence McKenna articulates, ayahuasca loves to take prideful people and rub their noses in it. I mean, it can make you beg for mercy like nothing. You have to really approach it humbly. And I feel it's potentially one of the plants where you're least likely to be able to hold up narcissism in. If you're working with a really strong altar and curandera, and if there's narcissism in you or your family, as opposed to other psychedelics, I feel like ayahuasca is much stronger at actually breaking down your self-delusions and spiritual bypassing. But it can hurt, and it can be scary, and it should, it really shouldn't be done lightly. And a big teacher. And I love this other quote: "In truth, ayahuasca is the television of the forest." Don't always necessarily agree with Terence, because he was he was a pioneer and he was a character, but he really articulates the potential power of this medicine. Part of what psychedelics do is they decondition you from your cultural values. This is what makes it such a political hot potato. Since all culture is a kind of a con game, the most dangerous candy you can hand out is the one which questions people, causes people to start questioning the rules of the game. The ayahuasca really is known for being a strong medicine to break down delusions, conditioning your sense of reality, what you thought was true, your stories, your family stories. And for some, they're not ready for that level of ontological shock, and it can be really dysregulating for the family members around them, for their partners. And yeah, society can be scared of that level of awakening and of awareness and of challenge. And it's one of those medicines that really needs to be worked with very closely, because the amount of information and downloads that you can get can be incredibly overwhelming. So the ayahuasca Dieta Vegetalista process. So Vegetalista, or the Vegetalismo lineage, is a Peruvian form of shamanism, and it is used quite commonly in Iquitos and in many surrounding areas in Peru. It's got very specific plants, and typically is done in the dark, and in obviously in an altar with curandero, shaman. And these shamans have a deep affinity with the plants as allies, as properties, personalities, to navigate the three worlds, which we'll talk about in a moment. Typically, the Vegetalista lineage is 10 days, can be more, but my experiences have been 10 days. And in that time, you have, over the 10 days, you drink ayahuasca 4 times every second day. You sit with a master plant every morning for 5 days. And you sit with your teacher and you drink the medicine, and you have time to have downloads with your teacher and learn about the medicine, and then spend the day alone in process with the master plant. Dieta is actually more about the master plant than it is the ayahuasca. So ayahuasca is really just an opener to help you experience the master plant. And over the 10 days, there is 5 24-hour fasts, very minimal talking. You can sing when called upon in ceremony, but there is significant time to be alone with your thoughts, with the breaking down, and with your master plants. There's no salt, no protein, obviously no alcohol, sex. It's a stripping back time, and a lot of people lose weight during this. When you do eat, it's just rice and some basic vegetables. And yeah, towards the end of the midpoint to the end of Dieta, you typically journey into lucidity, and many people report lucid dreaming, slowing down, and an acute sharpening of your senses. You can hear the trees, you can hear the wind, you can hear the heartbeat of the earth, and it's quite incredible. Of course, in order to do this, you would need to check, are you able to do this? Not everyone can remove salt from their diet safely. If people are keto, you can go into absolute keto shock, and it would be really not good for your body. You'd have to come out of keto and prepare for this. So there's physical ramifications for the dieta, but from my personal experience, it has been deeply challenging, but also restorative and really profoundly healing. So typically people encounter the feminine, the mother, the grandmother spirit through Aya, but also the master plants have their own properties and qualities. Conditioning collapses and dissolves, and there's a pocket in time where you get to reset and recreate self. No work, no TV, no news, nothing but you facing yourself and the larger cosmos and archetypal landscape. Just briefly back into the research space, what do we know about ayahuasca so far? I guess we know that it's potentially really powerful for treatment-resistant depression. There's phase 2 trials happening, and recurrent depression and alcoholism. There's many studies and centres around the world for addiction, but it has far wide-ranging use for physical properties as well, and they're looking into it even for neurogenesis, potentially for dementia, for different kind of chronic health conditions, because it's really a deep cleanser on the body. It has lots of properties for respiratory. So we've got a lot to learn about the medicinal properties that have been used for thousands of years. Yeah, it's a significant antidepressant with no serious adverse effects. They report vomiting, but you get used to vomiting and you know the purpose of the purging. So it can be a really fast treatment for antidepressant. And grief and existential concerns, people who are facing death or the death of a loved one, like many of the psychedelics, ayahuasca can be a profound healer for helping people to feel connected, and they're part of a larger landscape. What have I noticed from the therapy space for people that I support that are working with ayahuasca? I guess it can be a rapid accelerator of growth, because it really does break down people's stories and delusions. But it also renders people very vulnerable and open. And it's a plant that requires people to work on their metacognitive skills, to be able to learn the landscapes of the master plants, and to balance that with their ego, their personality, but also their transpersonal skin. And that's what we'll talk about as we move through the slides. Just acknowledging the limitations of ayahuasca research at the moment. How do we randomize double-blind control an ayahuasca study? How do we capture with our scientific tools that are ultimately interpreted and filtered through consciousness, through our own minds, through the minds of a researcher and the tools we create, these rich and diverse landscapes that are often unable to be spoken of, only experienced. And we'll just briefly mention the upper, middle and lower worlds, which is in Quechuan. The word pacha comes from Quechuan language, and the Incas really connect with this cosmology, and it's really helped me navigate my ayahuasca journeys. They believe that there are 3 realms, and all these realms ultimately are interconnected and weave and dance together. But there's the Hana Pacha, and that's the upper world. And in this space, when you drink ayahuasca, you can go, if you believe this from your perspective, you go into the astral, you go into DNA, ancestral realms. People report being able to bend time and travel across time, heal across time. There's allies, elders, deities, fractal dimensions, a lot of myth, legend, archetypes. So this realm is often experienced as Hana Pacha. We have Kai Pacha, which is the world of the living. This is form, this is the human This is us in the 3D world made manifest. These are our relationships. A lot of people want to avoid this world and just be up here. But we need to be, I believe, navigating all three. And then we have the Uka Pacha. So this is the underworld. And a lot of people assume that the underworld is dark. But the reality is there's light and dark in all of these realms. There is light, harmful experiences in the astral. Whether you believe it's a harmful being or just a harmful experience, there is dark up here and light up here as there is below. As below. And we have in this realm, I love the metaphor that I spoke to one of my mentors tonight, is it's the underworld. And sometimes when you're experiencing the plants in Dieta, you can experience like really green vision, kind of earthy dirt kind of experiences. It can be very heavy on the body. It can be very non-corporeal, like really you're not a human. You're in the root system. You're in the plants, almost like the mycelium of the universe. And metaphorically, which I explored tonight with my mentor, is that this is the world where we can actually cut through our entanglements, the energies that we don't want to work with, really the base of our foundation. What is your base foundation? Where are your roots? Where are your feet? Because if this is really out of balance and out of alignment, so will this, and so will this body. So it's an incredible time in the Dieta space to untangle, to break down, to dissolve, and then plant seeds in your underworld so that they may reach the Hanapacha, reach the astral, and then feed back into human relationships. I love the quote. It's a classic, Humphrey Osmond: "To fathom hell and to soar angelic, take a pinch of psychedelic." I think that is really, really ayahuasca and really the Dieta landscape. It can be hell in Dieta, and it can be profoundly angelic. And what matters is not just these altered states we experience, but how do we embody them into traits, to personality changes? How do we have this experience with the master plant and then weave it into our fabric, into our body, into our DNA? And just highlighting the mystical experience, what can happen under these medicines, the feeling of unity and interconnectedness, sense of sacredness, transcending space-time, the ineffable, being bathed in the love, God's love, and experiences of heaven and hell and other dimensions, meeting gods, entities, plant entities, stepping into them, so actually becoming them, shifting into different eras, countries. There's many different ways that the medicine can take you. And I love this quote. I published a journal for the EGA conference, and it was about the Ayahuasca Dieta Experience and exploring state spaces. Some people are driven to push against the edges of their state space and expand the boundaries of their state space map. But many people in our society want to control. They don't want to let go. They want predictability. And for some, yes, that works, but for others, it really feeds neurosis, illness, lack of flexibility, lack of cognitive flexibility, spiritual sickness. So personally, I'm the type of person that has always wanted to expand my boundaries, my maps of consciousness. And unfortunately, in our culture, we don't really know how to do that with young people. That's why many people enter into drugs from a really harmful perspective, because what they're wanting to do is search, explore maps of consciousness, expand their state space, but they don't have the cultures and the elders to hold them in that. And it is really my passion to really have these discussions with younger people from a harm reduction perspective, so that they don't feel ashamed of wanting to dissolve boundaries, and how can they do that safely. This is at Amaru Spirit, where I began my ayahuasca work, and just what an incredible experience that was. I went there in a really pivotal moment of my life after many years of being a sexual abuse therapist, and I had completely lost all hope in humanity, and the darkness had really taken over for 2 years, and I was living in quite painful existential hell while I went about my PhD and my travel and my publishing and my raising my babies. And I went there as a last resort, and it was the most challenging couple of weeks of my life. My first journey, I swore I would never ever drink ayahuasca again. It was too powerful. I'd seen too much. And the curandera said to me, he said, "Lani, before you make a decision, I recommend doing the medicine 5 times." And that's not scientific advice, and I'm not telling you to go and do that. But what happened was I got sent to my maloka for 5 days in isolation, and no one spoke to me except for the shaman that gave me mapacho. I had a mapacho ceremony, which I drank every day for 5 days. And mapacho is a master plant. It's Nicotina rustica, and you drink it, and if you don't purge, you die. And I didn't know anything about this. I was just in a state of existential shock, swearing I'd never do ayahuasca again, and that my plan to heal had gone terribly wrong. Yeah, and I spent 5 days on a mapacho dieta, totally alone. Just had 3 bats with me. That was it. And in this process, there really was a purification and cleansing of me, my story, my illness that was in me, the darkness. Developed and dropped into what Eckhart Tolle would describe as the power of now. I just sat for 8 hours a day, just in complete and utter stillness, just processing what I'd been through, and intuition coming through my body. And I broke down, and I dissolved. And as I did, I strengthened. And then over the years, as I've learned to work with mapacho as a master plant, how these medicines can protect you. I still work in sexual abuse, and children are still being harmed, and there's enormous pain that I deal with every day, as we all do. But for some reason now, I have this container that can hold that darkness, and not a naive affiliation with the plants. Like, I know how powerful they are, and I know how dark this world can be, but a real love now for the mystery, and a real confidence in myself to be able to navigate life and death and everything in between. So what would have helped me if I had been told this information before I did Dieta? That the Dieta experience is built up of many, many phenomenology. So you can get information in the Dieta that is literal. You can be told you need to leave your job, and you need to. You can be tricked. You can be tricked in the medicine, because it might be your ego. You might be in a part when you actually sit at the altar. You might be setting an intention from like a really needy place. I need a man in my life. I need this man. And you drink the medicine, and the medicine tells you that a man's coming, and to look out for this, man, on a white horse. And it's just a delusion. It's not actually real. So parts work is really interesting in this space. Are you in self when you set the intention, or are you in a part? And you're aware that you're in a part. And it's okay if you are. You might be sitting at the altar, and your inner child might come out. But have the metacognitive skills to know that you felt 5 years old when you took that drink, and what that meant in the medicine. And when you're interpreting and feeling into the information, are you still 5 years old, or are you back in self energy? It's really learning the language of yourself, of your parts, and of the medicine. The medicine can also be deeply archetypal. You can experience, the pain of what it's like to be a mother, a father. I often experience, for some reason, I have no idea why, the Israeli-Palestine conflict. I've spent many hours purging those wars, and I have no idea why. Strangely, now I live in Caulfield North and I'm surrounded by the Jewish community, so maybe there's like an affinity there, but you can really be pulled into energies that you don't even know why. Countries, ancestors, the person in the room next to you, and how do you decipher that? You know, what's yours, what's theirs, what do you need to experience, and then what do you actually need to move on because it's not yours and it's not going to serve you. The medicine can also drop you into cosmic trash. Not everything in the Ayahuasca Dieta or in the journey is profound and meaningful. You can fly through the astral and it's junk. It's grey, it's trash, it hurts, it feels weird. What I encourage in those spaces is just be an observer. Be an observer of the phenomena without judgment, without assuming everything is personal to you. Because when you open yourself up to these spaces, you're in a personal and impersonal world. There's that paradox. So learning to decipher what's yours and what's just to witness and behold. Of course, there's plant symbiosis, animal, plant, mineral consciousness and shape shifting. You can feel what it's like to be a rock or a tree or a wall, you know, and that comes with depersonalization and derealization. And for anyone who's got complex trauma or DID in their daily life, in their 3D world, and then has ayahuasca, that can be a lot to hold psychically, just from a self-care and harm reduction perspective. So we don't recommend typically people who are really fragmented going into the medicine because it can further fragment. However, many of my clients, many of the people around the world that I've worked with have healed their fragmentation through ayahuasca. So I think there's, from a research perspective, there's so much we need to know. I think it comes down to, you know, the setting, the holding, the person doing their own metacognitive work, a lot of skill. But just a word of caution, if you're really fragmented, maybe there's some other steps you need to take before opening up into the cosmos, which is vast. So how does one integrate the different properties and personalities and qualities of the master plant? There's 4 keys, which are really helpful at the beginning of any journey, any medicine really. They're applicable to all. Is breath, is learning to be in your body and know how to breathe and to call upon your breath. And no matter how many times I've drunk ayahuasca, I've always been tested beyond my wildest dreams with breath. Like, how can I get through this moment of fear? And it's through the breath. The breath is life force. It connects you to the astral, but it also connects you to your body and to self-regulation. Just know that the only way out is through. So the more that you fight it, the more that you resist, the more that you contract, the more pain you'll have. And that can take years to learn. And there's so many ups and downs with that journey, but the only way out is through. And having a mantra, and it can be just a really short word, you know, trust, let go, trust the plants, you know, any word that is going to help you. I had an experience once where I was, you know, in a lot of trauma and in real trouble in the medicine, and a mantra that I'd worked on years ago just came out in my mind without my permission or without my conscious awareness. And the mantra just started grounding me, and I was able to witness it, and the mantra came in and grounded me. So having that, or having an intentional anchor, you know, trust, beauty, love, something that you're working with in that cycle, and really hold that dear. And stillness, a big part of the ayahuasca dietary vegetalista lineage is stillness. So people get trained through the process to hold their own. You know, you move around the room in the dark. You don't ask for help unless you really need it. You know, there's hours and hours and hours, sometimes in silence, where you are still. You are not scratching, not rustling, not dropping things. You are still. And when you get a room of dieteros together that know the stillness practice, it is the levels of depth that you can reach is profound. But just to acknowledge, it is, for many people, it can be traumatic at the start, because if you've had any sexual abuse or violence, if to be told to sit still in the dark and be silent, it's a lot to hold. So I just want to acknowledge all the brave warriors in the dietero lineage that have healed their trauma in those conditions, because it really takes bravery to that next level. Now I'll just talk you through some of my master plants. We have Bobinsana. It's a curandera plant, and it's known for the divine feminine, for self-esteem, for confidence, for having a voice in the world. And it was after the Bobinsana Dieta that I really started to sing, write songs. I've never had a musical bone in my body, and after that, and I have a voice, and it's like, where did that come from? An incredible teacher for confidence. Yeah. Okay. And we have Renikia up here. Renikia is a plant of symbiosis. So it's a strangler fig that doesn't actually kill its host. And when you diet on this plant, it's about getting in right relationship, looking at your life, looking at who you're in relationship with, whether it's people, the earth, money, sexuality, and getting in balance with that. And it's a real symbol of weaving with people, weaving with complexity, weaving with shadow, but in symbiosis. And it was a very profound teacher for me, particularly coming out of a really complex time in my career, dealing with people, dealing with personalities, dealing with the psychedelic landscape, which is fraught with all sorts of complexities, but really, who are my relationships? What do they look like? How are they making me feel? And how am I making them feel? And Kapanuri tree is a massive tree and is known for its protection, its roots. It is also, it's hard to speak of some of these trees. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. It's a big protector tree, and it weaves, as I spoke to someone recently, they don't work in isolation. So the Kapanuri tree creates space and protection, and then the Bobinsana comes through with the empowerment and the voice. And we have, just bringing up my notes. So we've got the choo-choo bark, and chuchuwasi is a plant that they believe works on lineage. So a lot of people sit with choo-choo if they're going to have children, if they want to cut any of the cords in their family that are patterns, addictions, behaviors. So it's a really cleaning out and resetting of lineage. And also I want to acknowledge the master plan at Trixanango. This one over here, it was my first plant after Mapacho, and it is a plant of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And by far one of the strongest dietas on my body. I could barely walk during that dieta. Deep medicine on the body. But what it does is, and the curandera will help you through this, it helps you work out yesterday what went on, what you need to clear, heal, face, what you're holding, grudges, energies, even your cultural conditioning, your lineage, your legacy burdens from an IFS perspective. What is your yesterday? And clear that. Little boy stories, girl stories, stories that are keeping you small, victim blaming, being a victim, really cutting that so that you can step into today and be really present in who you are. And then, so you can vision and call in a future that is in alignment with your highest values and your highest truths. So yeah, these are only some of the plants I've sat with, but I guess even though I obviously am very spiritual and have a deep affinity with the plants, there's still a part of me that's, that's skeptical, and there's a part of me that's rational and agnostic at times. And so I guess I want to acknowledge, even if you don't believe in plant spirits as an entity and taking host of your body, when you sit with these plants symbolically and spend 10 days in those conditions, without salt, with music, with Icaros, you do take on the journey of that plant. And whether it's literal, symbolic, metaphorical, or the host. And that is really what the Dieta experience is. Once you have the plant is you and you are the plant. That's the belief, that you embody these powers, for a better word, these qualities, and that you can call on them at any time outside Dieta, and that they're in you for life. We have, just Mapacho, so Nicotina rustica, just acknowledging that, in the West, there is research, of course, to prove that smoking and nicotine is cancerous. And again, I'm fully aware of that and supportive of that. But it is one of the most revered master plants in Peru, in Pacho. It's known for vision, for clarity, and for healing. A lot of people I know wear it, women wear it in their bra. It's like near their heart to protect themselves energetically. You can have the Dieta, again, very dangerous. You can die if it's not done properly. People offer Mapacho into the fire for prayer. They bath with it, put it in the bath and let it sink in. If you've had a really, really awful day of grief or shock to the body, it can really help to recenter you. And it's used in the brew, in the ayahuasca brew as well. And, personally, I only work with it in ceremony. I don't typically have it, during the week or anything. And you're meant to have an intention for the Mapacho. It's not a cigarette. You don't drink alcohol with it. You don't share it. You don't eat food. It is a prayer. It's a direct line between you, the astral, the different realms, and it's sacred. It's people that don't work with it properly can get really sick as well. So it's very different from cigarettes, from vapes. It's a sacred plant medicine, and you can legally import it. I've got an import license. You're allowed to import it, so it is legal. So how are we going for time? Good. So ayahuasca is driven by sound, by song, by whistling, and its ability to transform sound, including vocal sound, into the visual spectrum. And it indicates that some kind of information processing membrane or boundary is being overcome by the pharmacology of this stuff. And things normally experienced as acoustically experienced become visibly beheld. And it's quite spectacular. So what Terence McKenna is talking about here is that when the curandero, the ayahuasquero, sings an Icaro, there is that the boundaries change. The medicine, there is a communication from those realms through the Icaro into you, into your cells, into your body, into your story, and sound becomes visual. And the words, the prayers, the downloads become visual, and they are extremely powerful. Most people purge deeply during the Icaros. It can be very uncomfortable, it can be very painful, it can be blissful, depending on your experience. But there really is a membrane or a boundary state that changes very significantly in the Icaro. I wrote in my EGA journal that, I have experienced being inside the songline, like inside almost like the membrane, the tube of the Icaro, and being carried up. And as soon as the shaman stopped singing, just that one word where he stopped, just evaporated. It was quite phenomenal to visually behold, kind of being inside the Icaro. powerful song lines. They cleanse, they heal, they invoke spirits. Really, there's a lot of tools. There's chukapa, hitting. Sometimes the songs sound really uncomfortable. They're not always pleasant to hear. Like, it can be quite challenging, and it really transports people into different time and space continuums. They're traditionally learned in two ways: directly from the plant spirit. In the dieta, a lot of the dieteros come out with these incredible songs spontaneously, just bang, in the dark, quite magical to behold. Or the shaman, the lineage holder, will pass on the ikaros to the dietero. All right, so shall we listen to one for 5 minutes to break it up? Oh, actually, before we do that, as I mentioned, I love this photo. This kind of represents one of the images I saw in my first journey ever, except it was much more scary and much more faster, and but it's a little snapshot into what I saw. But the purge through the Ikaro, we purge for ourselves, for others, for countries, for eras, for energy bodies, and for our ancestors. And we often drink medicine for all those people who will never drink, and in that, purge for our family, purge for this planet. It's my little boy, the little legal San Pedro there. Caught him singing, playing his harmonica to the plants, and if we sing to the plants, they will sing with us. All right, just let me pop on the Ikaro. It's a long one, so I'll only play it for 5 minutes. But what I ask is if you could just really be with the Ikaro and just notice how it's making you feel. It's okay if you don't like it, if tired, bored, distracted, or if you actually connect and plug into some of the plants. But I'd be really curious, and after the Ikaro, I'll ask people in the chat just to write in a couple of words of how it made them feel.
Hello, hello, day, day. Hello, hello, day. Hello, hello, day, day. Hello, hello, day. Hello, hello, day, day. Hello, hello, day, day. Hello, hello, day, day. Hello, hello, day, day. Ayahuasca mamangkuna jamuriri. Ayahuasca mamangkuna jamuriri. Cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito. Cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito. Allo, 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 day, day. Allo, 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 day, day. Allo, 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 day, day. Hello, 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 day, day. Bobin sana mamanguna jamoriri. Bobin sana mamanguna jamoriri. Cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito. Cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito. Hello, 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 day, day. 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 Hello, hello, day, day. Hello, 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 day, day. Hello, hello, day, day. Hello, 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 day, day. Mapachito y mamanguna jamori. Papachito mamanguna, yamoririri, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire. Kamalungai mamanguna jamoririri, Kamalungai mamanguna jamoririri, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire. Chuchu asha mamanguna jamoririri, chuchu asha mamanguna jamoririri, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, alura, 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 ire, 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 alura, alura, ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, alura, ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, aho sacha mamanguna jamoririri, aho sacha mamanguna jamoririri, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, jiriksanangwai mamanguna jamoririri, jiriksanangwai mamanguna jamoririri, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, alura, 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 ire, 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 alura, alura, ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, alura, ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire. Chakrunera mamanguna jamoririri, chakrunera mamanguna jamoririri, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, uchisanangwai mamanguna jamoririri, uchisanangwai mamanguna jamoririri, cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, espiritito, 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 alura, 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 ire, alura, alura, ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, alura, ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 ire, alura, 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 Waira kaspi mamangkuna jamoririri. Waira kaspi mamangkuna jamoririri. Pura pura cuerpecito, limpia limpia spiritito. Pura pura cuerpecito, limpia limpia spiritito. Alura lura lura ire, alura lura lura ire, alura lura lura ire. Allora, 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 ire, utturungo e mammanguna, jammoririri. Utturungo mammanguna, jammoririri. Pura, pura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, spiritito. Pura, pura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, spiritito. Allora, 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 ire, allora, 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 ire. Allora, 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 ire. Allora, 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 ire. Lucerito e mammanguna, jamoririri. Lucerito e mammanguna, jamoririri. Cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, spiritito. Cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, spiritito. Allora, 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 ire. Allora, 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 ire. Allora, 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 ire. Allora, 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 ire. Sumiruna mamanguna, jamoririri. Sumiruna mamanguna, jamoririri. Pura, pura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, spiritito. Pura, pura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, spiritito. Allora, 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 ire. 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 Allora, allora, ire. Allora, 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 ire. Allora, allora, ire. Allora, 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 ire. Allora, 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 ire. Allora, 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 ire. Allora, 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 ire. Ayahuasca mamanguna, jamoririri. Ayahuasca mamanguna, jamoririri. Cura, cura, cuerpecito, limpia, limpia, spiritito. 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 Allora, 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 ire. 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 Allora, allora, ire. Allora, 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 ire. Allora, allora, ire. Allora, 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 ire. Niet, niet, allora, 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 ire.
Hmm. Gently returning. Hope you all got to have a little listen to that. I'm curious if you would like to place some words in the chat of what that was like to hear that. I'll read them out. Mesmerizing. Heart rate sped up a bit, absolutely. And it can, with the medicine, with the chikapa, starting to call in plants, the body can really start to escalate. Robinson experience, rhythmic. Dog was excited. Yay. I didn't realize I was like patting my dog the other day and singing Ikoro, and didn't even realize I was doing it, and just smacking her basically with the magic of the medicine. Yeah, felt this quite deep inside me. Felt like traveling and wandering. Beautiful. Really encourage people to explore shamanic music and Ikoros. You don't need to be drinking ayahuasca to experience the medicine of these songs, particularly if you are going through a difficult time and need cleansing and need connection and need healing. You can really play around with that and explore the landscapes there. So I'll move back to sharing the screen now. Beautiful. Yeah, and I just wanted to acknowledge the incredible world of archetypes and totems and animals in the ayahuasca and the dieta space. You can be gifted with the most incredible visitations from animals, from their vibrations, their teachings, their presence, their beings, and ancestors. And this is where really Indigenous cosmologies and shamanism really meet, and particularly if you're lucky enough to hear the didgeridoo ceremony and just those song lines and the Wujaki medicine with ayahuasca. It's incredible. Okay. So I'll just move through this space, that just really hoping that you can start to see that altered states don't necessarily mean altered traits and embodied wisdom. There's a whole lot of work that needs to go on behind the scenes. Our states of consciousness are transient, and we all embody different state spaces. We switch in and out of throughout our day, as well as parts. So we've got our different states, such as yoga, sex, ritual, celebrations, trance, meditation, sleeping, waking, dreaming. And within those state spaces, we also have our parts, and we also have medicines and the wider cosmology. So there's a lot going on when you start tapping into these fields. And these states influence how we think, feel, and act towards ourselves and others. When we sit together, we invite the plant consciousness into our field. This not only alters our state, but it can alter our DNA, our body, our traits, and how we are in the world and how we show up. Dan Siegel talks about mind sight, which is metacognition, a seventh sense. It's looking within the perceived mind to reflect on our own experiences. But what I really believe, and what I've written about in the EGA journal, is that in dieta, you hold the meta mind, but also within a cosmic mind in the upper, middle, and lower realms. Hearts, stories, song lines, echoes, downloads, emotions, somatic responses, nervous system maps, plant properties, and personalities. And to be able to hold this does require wisdom and intelligence and skills. You need to have the capacity to know your parts, know your nervous system maps, know your shadow, and to be able to reflect. And the more that you do this in the 3D world, what we find is that you're able to hold a larger bandwidth in the medicine. You're able to witness, the trickster, the literal download, the cosmic junk. You're able to hold center and your relationship with the plants. And in dieta, you learn to call on specific plants for help and to navigate different terrain. That comes with a lot of skill and trust, and it's a whole nother language, the dieta language, which, I'm not an expert in. I'm a student of the plant kingdom, will be forever, always learning. Sometimes I completely lose touch with my plants. I'm not always in deep symbiosis with them. I'm a modern day mum, and I get ripped out of these worlds all the time, and particularly because in Australia, it's not legal for the spirituality to occur, and it takes work to stay connected to your plants and to the prayer that you're working through. So we've got the mindset, the setting, your environment and context, and the skill, the metacognitive skills. The aim is to be in the right mind at the right time and be aware of when you're in the wrong mind or the difficult mind. So I guess this applies to parts work, internal family system, and the medicine work. So knowing if you're in a hellish realm, knowing if you're stepping into plant consciousness, or if you're experiencing an archetype or your mother's pain. It takes a lot of practice to be able to decipher and tease out the mind or the landscape that you're in. And how can you sharpen some of these skills? So become a compassionate, curious explorer of phenomena and consciousness. Be really careful with fixed notions of truth, of dogma, of any cult-like behavior. Just be an observer. Be careful of really clinging to beliefs, because I think with that, you shut down possibility. And you're interpreting so much through the mind and through dogma and belief that you're actually losing some of this ineffability that's found in the plants. So reflective journaling and questioning of self, capacity to observe thoughts and emotions in self and others and within the medicine. Identify, distinguish, and make meaning of psychic content and parts. You can do that through journaling, through song, through painting, collaging. Really start to weave in the symbolic realm. Integrity. You will journey far and wide in consciousness the more that you're able to show up in the world with integrity, and that's living in alignment with your values and goals and ethics, and monitor any incongruence. When you're out of integrity, just own it and allow yourself to say, I've relapsed, or my narcissism's flaring up, or I'm being controlling. Really own it, and the medicine will reward you, and the parts will reward you as well. And be able to hold nuance and multiple perspectives. Be really curious of consciousness. And it helps to recognize the interconnectedness of all beings. My shaman often says to me, you are the medicine and the medicine is you. And in Dieta, that's really helpful, because it means that you're a co-creator of consciousness. You're not a victim of ayahuasca and her wrath. You're co-creating with her, and there's lessons there to be learnt, and you've got responsibility within the medicine. And if you can rise to that challenge, there can be huge rewards. The self is a narrative. One of my mentors, Dr. Trail Dowie, once said to me, psychedelics give us the opportunity to consciously and deliberately re-narrativize our experience. What story do you want to tell? So when you dissolve and break down, you've got this window, as I said with Churuk Sanango, what is your yesterday that you need to clear, so that you can step into the day and you can really vision and dream in the future that you want. So metacognitive skills increase our capacity to reorganize our mind during Dieta, post-Dieta, and really stabilize the plant within self. So what are the qualities of the plant that you've been working with, and how are you weaving them into your 3D world? How is it showing up at work, relationships, in how you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself? That's how we apply these skills. So just briefly, because I'm curious, but don't have a lot of time. I might go a tiny bit over, maybe 10 minutes over, but you feel free to drop out if you need to. I'll send these slides across and you know that. So the first stage after the Dieta is the pre-narrativization stage. And this applies to a lot of psychedelics, really, this model. It's immediately after the Dieta ends, the salt enters your body, you get given salt, and you quickly and abruptly move out of lucidity, and your ego comes back online. And it can be very emotional. You can cry, people can kind of make strange noises, they can laugh. It's like salt is back in the body, and you're coming back into the 3D world and the ego. But it can also be a time of did this happen? Did I imagine that? Was I hallucinating? The doubt can come back. So it's a unique opportunity to stay connected to the master plan while the ego is coming back in. You've got huge cognitive malleability and openness. You would have gone through a process of being deeply vulnerable as well as strengthening. So you're in a really paradoxical landscape. You'll also be quite tired potentially and skinny and need over time to rebuild. But after every dieta, you actually have at least a two-week strict dieta protocol. Each plant has different rules. So for example, with Churuksanungo, you are not allowed to touch anyone for a month, anyone under 6. And, for some people that is just a medicine of its own. You realize how needy you are, how much your partner might demand from you. It's a real time to be curious about energy, of boundaries, of touch, because you can't have it, and really strengthening and holding your own. So there's a lot of different rules and processes for the plants to land into your body. Certain oils, sugars, alcohol, drugs, sex. There's no sex for those weeks after with yourself or with others. So the cleansing, the purification continues. It can be very tempting to, all the stuff you want to do. It can be hard to hold that line. But when you do, if you have caffeine or sugar or oils, it will close down the portal. Doesn't mean, people have different beliefs about this. Some are very serious and believe the plants will punish you, etc. I take a more modern day approach, is that you take it very seriously, but you're learning and people do stuff up. And I don't personally buy into too much of the that type of language, but it's about reverence, and it's about, if you do shut down the portal, you're just robbing yourself of depth and that opportunity for the plant to go deeper into your system. Ritual and weaving with the symbolic. And so this is my Chakapa, the Jonta, another separate process. This is a mesa. It's not typically a vegetalista process. This is an Andean process where you have a cloth bundle where you program your stones with uphills and nustras, a mountain, the water bodies, and you set an intention every cycle with the seasons, equinox, etc. And you sit with that prayer for 3 months with your stones, and the stones are typically abundance, spirituality, love and health. And of course you have anything else that nourishes you or that you're working with. I always have death at the center of my mesa as an ally now. It was what brought me to the jungle, fear of death, and it is now my biggest ally that I work with on a daily basis. And this is Kamalonga seeds, which are a curandera plant, but for protections, you just put that on your head, and you can smell it, and in your heart, and the back of your body, and it's just a shamanic tool for protection. So the dieta experience does not have to fade with the light of day. As James Hillman once said, that mystical experiences by their very nature tend to fade with the light of day. After enlightenment comes the laundry. But when you learn to weave in your plants and their properties and their messages into your life through art, through mesa work, through songlines, through relationships, through community, the plants are everywhere. They're not just in the Maloka. And that's the most important thing, is we shouldn't have to keep going back to ceremony. People love it. It's a way of life. It's their spirituality. But for some, they can't go back. One journey is enough for many years. But they can take that one journey and make that medicine for life. And that's what I'm really trying to specialize in at the Signs of Life, is safety and harm reduction, but also finding the magic and the medicine outside of the actual ceremony as well. Yeah, and just acknowledging, again, the tarot, or the Jungian tarot, not from a fortune-telling perspective, but from the reality that these blueprints, these archetypes are in all of us. they're in the medicine community, they're in the psychedelic community. And the more that you engage with the archetypes in the medicine, you start to experience Leela, as the Hindus coined the divine play of all these characters, that we're playing. And what I love about, I guess, my spirituality at the moment is that I'm really loving being a human and all its quirks and all the challenges of the ego, and really moving between both of those worlds, my transpersonal medicine, non-dual plant consciousness, but also just being a woman, being a mother, being flawed, being full of doubt, full of fears and worries, and being able to proudly move through all of those states and traits as part of this journey home, as Jungian describes to self. So these archetypes present themselves in the community, in the faces of the community. And what is your story? What character are you weaving at the moment? And who is in your community of relationship? It can be really beautiful to explore that with the tarot or with symbols. And how attached are you to your story and your character? And do you love it? Are you laughing with it? Are you dancing with it? Or is it causing you enormous suffering? Don't rush to reorder. Create and expand space for the symbolic realm. Stay open to colours, images, feelings, archetypes, myths, sand play, poetry. Just really feel into the vibration of all these medicines that are available to us all. They're everywhere. The medicine of friendship. Some of the most incredible relationships I've found through medicine work, because just brave, really brave warriors, gentle and fierce. And I can honestly say that those friendships are like medicine for me. They really sustain me and support me, magical friendships. Body-based practices are incredible after integration, or at any time, obviously, but calligraphy is something that we often do after ayahuasca the next day. Just gentle movement and dropping into the dantian and just slowing down and being, just letting the medicine and the downloads just stillness. And I love what that Tzu says is the Tao that can be named is not the true and eternal Tao. And it's something to drop into when you're in the monkey mind. If you're trying to figure everything out, drop into the heart, drop into the expansiveness that if you can name it, it's probably not it. It's just an approximation. And be really wary of any shaman, Wandero, human being that has the answers, because from my perspective, we don't. We have approximations. We can only experience it in an embodied way, and then, we lose it in words. Stay connected to the subtle qualities of the medicine. Prevent the rational, analytical mind from closing back down possibilities too soon. So day 4 to 7, post dieta, you can start, exploring those insights a little bit deeper. What story was broken down? What have you learnt? A journal. You've spent time in the symbolic realm, and you still stay there, but you can start just gently looking at those insights, the journal entries that you write on dieta. You're not allowed to read on dieta. You're not allowed any TV. You're not allowed typically any music. It's just you and your instruments and your pen and paper. So you've got like a very clear field. Beautiful space to go back and visit that and write songs and explore parts work as well. Love this picture a student found for me. Thank you for that one. Epic depiction of modernity, excessive caffeine, technology, politics, incessant daily news, poor food, stressful people that don't know how to hold boundaries, traumatic relationships. Really protect yourself from all this stuff in pre and post dieta. The medicine cannot move in and through us if we are full, fragmented and blocked. Characteristics that are far too common for the Western neoliberalist society. Be really mindful of spiritual bypassing, ego and projection onto the plants. A lot of people think ayahuasca is going to save them, the plants are going to heal them. It's a relationship. and you need to step up, and you need to be part of that. And to be honest, it's typically a tough relationship, a tough walk to get across. It's not for the faint-hearted. And if you think you know it all, or you get angry at the plants, and I guess this is all natural, and you can work it out with your therapist and integration coach. But I guess just be really mindful of the reverence with these plants, and that it's relational. Yeah. Skip that one. Total narrativation. So this is beyond the first couple of weeks. So you're moving out of the dieta landscapes. You're sealed in your master plan. You're starting to close down the diet and return to normal food. So just keep reflecting on how you can show up in the real world. What has all this been for? What are your behaviors like, your ethics, your practices? Do a ritual to close off your integration. Could be mesa work, song creation, singing. I personally love just to have, after I've broken diet, I have a food frenzy with my children. And, we eat all the things that I was not allowed to eat. So I have a very naughty part in me, but I hold that line until it's time. So celebrate the pleasures of life again, the foods, the sugars, the, being able to touch and hug and just really appreciate those moments again, because they're quite humbling when you can hug someone for the first time in 2 months, and how precious that person is, and have you actually told them. Community. Again, acknowledging this is illegal in Australia and people have to travel overseas for this, and it's a real human rights violation, and it can be done safely. We need to acknowledge that people go and drink alcohol, no judgment, but all over Australia, people are getting drunk. There is a deep connection with alcohol and family violence and many issues, and people are allowed to do that every week, every day of the week if they want. But someone who wants to commune with a master plan in Australia or facilitate that can face jail time. And we really need to question the culture that really allows that, and work together as a community so that these medicines, when they do come, that we do the right thing by them, that we are custodians of these lands and medicines. It's just a beautiful image of the intimacy and the connection that people can have when you learn to love yourself and love the mystery and walk the paradox of life and death that we all have to navigate in this lifetime. And Alex Gray. It's honouring his artwork and his incredible depictions of the DNA, the nervous systems, and the ayahuasca worlds. And just in closing, just acknowledging that the biomedical misappropriation, this paradigm that only values the medical model, and we're seeing that shift, but it's going to take a long time. Plant spirits, plant entities, giving the power back to the people. We're still a really long way off from that. And as the culture shifts in Australia, the exciting news of the TGA rescheduling, we actually all need to be louder than ever about multidisciplinary practices and Indigenous wisdom and protocols and practices that value nature and protect plant, overuse of plants, and ensuring that we have that symbiotic relationship. All the altar will be cooked, and the research labs and the data, it can say what it wants, but if we don't have that integrity, how sustainable are these results, and how sustainable is it in culture? In closing, so Michael Pollan famously once said, when you journey far and wide into consciousness, you bump into the sacred. So I've added, when you integrate with metacognitive skills and contemplative practices, you're not only going to bump into the sacred, but you can embody and stabilize the sacred. Thank you.